Hi, Capricorn. Welcome to your December 2018 Astro Update. I'm Raina, and I think I'm going to be calling this month for you Dream Time. And it was funny, I was flashing on this memory of going back to college in my early 30s and just taking one course, not thinking in terms of getting a degree or anything, and taking a course in what is it called? Like, I was going to say organized religion, but, just world religion, different types of religions. And they had something about the Aborigines, and they have this concept of dream time. I believe it was someone like them. And I think I'm not confusing it with Native Americans. I hope I'm not. But it's kind of like, the Native Americans have a dream quest, right? So maybe I'm thinking of that. But this idea of really valuing that aspect of yourself and seeing it as a part of, who you are and what you're about, and not just saying, okay, well, I just had this dream or this vision, and that's like a fantasy. No, it's really upheld, and I can't remember all the details of what it means, but basically when you have planets in the 12th house, this is a very dreamy time because Sagittarius for Capricorn is your 12th house, and you just had Jupiter enter this house in November, and in December, you start the month with the sun in that house. You will have had a Mercury retrograde in this 12th house, and on the first of the month, Mercury goes into Scorpio, which is your 11th house. But here's the interesting thing about that. The 11th house is the house of hopes and dreams. It's very interesting because the 12th house is like literal dreams in terms of going Betty by and what you envision. Now, some people would call that astral traveling, that you're actually experiencing those things. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really delved too deeply into figuring that out, but at least we're talking about dreams in both houses. The 11th house are your conscious dreams, so your hopes and wishes is another way they put it. But it's your long-range goals that may have nothing to do with career matters, maybe where you want to live, what kind of climate, what kind of housing structure or dwelling. All these things that we just take for granted, and we just sometimes say, okay, I want to live here, but we don't really go into detail about different aspects of it. And you may have like very specific things or a way of life that really appeals to you, that you're working towards. Well, during this Mercury retrograde, you had it begin in the 12th house, and it has come back into that 11th house. And so that can take like your subconscious mind and the longings that brings up for you. And with the 11th house, it's much more conscious. And so you're working with this part of yourself that's aspirational, that's not about, I think of the 10th house as much more practical. That's the house that you rule, and you're an earth sign. So there's got to be, practicality in the forefront of a house like that. And on the 2nd, Venus goes into Scorpio from that 10th house when it was in Libra, going into the 11th house. So you've had Venus in the 10th house. Actually, this is where Venus landed when she retrograded. So you have had to kind of like question your values, Capricorn, for the last month and a half. And this may involve money because Venus can bring money. About like, is money your God? Is that the most important thing to you? What about your own dreams? Is money like what drives them, or are there other things you can do? I want to just mention too that the 11th house is a house of the collective. So even if we were talking about dreams that you have or goals that you have, you may decide, hey, you know what? I don't really want to live by myself. I would rather live with other people in a more communal setting, or in a kind of a community where we have our own individual dwellings, but we live all together in this community. You may have these kinds of thoughts going on. I think of Capricorn as a solitary sign, but you are right next to Aquarius, and you could have some inner planets or the moon in Aquarius, and that could influence your desire to be with other people. That could make it more likely that you'd like to do that. And the 11th house is actually ruled by Aquarius. So you may be having these kinds of debates in your head, or, just kind of crunching the numbers and fantasizing, imagining being in that position and how that would feel for you. And how does money play a role in this? Maybe living in this type of environment makes money less of a need because you realize you'd be sharing it with other people. So who knows? Just bringing that up, a little possibility there. So Mercury goes direct on the 6th in Scorpio in that 11th house. And again, your wheels have been turning and you've kind of maybe come to some kind of decision about something that you're planning for the long term. And the next day, we have a new moon in Sagittarius in the 12th house. So the month before your solar return, Capricorn, physically you can feel drained, you can feel more introverted than usual, more introspective, less social, and more feelings of confusion. Sometimes the 12th house can bring that. And actually, speaking of that, you're going to have Mercury going back into its own sign on the 12th, and that will be in that 12th house. So the new moon in the 12th house on the 7th can be good for spiritual pursuits and things like that. It's not going to be a place that you feel forward movement. In fact, it is the last house. So even though this is a new moon there, part of whatever you're endeavoring to do in the next month could be about kind of tying up some loose ends rather than creating new projects and things like that. You probably will feel a lot more certain about your direction in January, even though we do have a lot of good stuff happening later this month as well. As the month progresses, Mercury comes out of its shadow and fully out of its shadow on Christmas Day, 25th. And then you have your new moon in your sign in early January. So the sun goes into your sign actually on the 21st, on the solstice. And that will be the beginning of you feeling more energetic, feeling more like yourself. The sun coming back to you, that solar return. And happy birthday to those early Capricorns in the first 10 degrees of the sign. And on the 22nd, there will be a full moon at 0 degrees of Cancer. in your seventh house of committed partnership. All of these dates are subject to your own personal natal chart. And yes, there's a solar chart as well. But even with that, your individual degree of Sun in Capricorn is also impacts the actual dates of these things happening. So this reading is just meant to give a general, overview of potential energy for this time period. The thing about this full moon is that you may see a partner in a light that you haven't seen before, where all of the kind of like conflict, if there was any kind of conflict, you may have looked at it in terms of yourself, especially if they blamed you for it and said you're the reason that they are doing such and such. And you may have kind of like internalized that and said, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And honestly took it upon yourself possibly to try to alter your behavior. And maybe you finally see this person in a very clear light around this time, right before Christmas. And sometimes these things happen, the holidays. I think I read somewhere that the holidays can produce a lot of divorce and breakups. And I'm imagining that it has to do with a certain psychosis that takes over people during the holidays. I've noticed this. And I don't really know the cause of it. I suspect that in some cases it has to do with people who had unhappy childhoods and they always wanted the perfect Christmas. Or, if you have other holidays that are like Christmas, like Hanukkah, or I don't know. The only thing that I have to go by is Christmas. So I don't know if they compare in the way that people kind of put all their hopes and dreams on them, or if Christmas is unique in that way. And, the commercialization of it doesn't help things either. So the kind of the buildup in Hollywood of what, it's a wonderful life and all that stuff. And it can be fun to live in that fantasy if you know it's fantasy. But the people that really get like crazed about Christmas and they love it so much, sometimes I wonder if they are, putting too many expectations on it. So maybe some kind of a holiday thing put strain on your relationship, and you see that person in a whole new light. And when I'm saying that, I mean, it could be a negative. However, I guess it's always possible that you see the person in a good way. And maybe that prompts you, if you're not committed to that person, well, you would be, because this is the seventh house. I don't know. Maybe it's something where you decide to propose to someone on that date, or, that you're going to do it at some future time. So maybe you see them as, yeah, I think this person would make a great wife or a great husband. And it's like you weren't really sure until that moment. But there is something going on with Capricorn that is pretty much, it's pretty testing, isn't it? Having Pluto in your sign for the last 10 years, having Saturn enter your sign. Now, especially with Saturn, since it's your ruler, I don't think that that'll necessarily be a bad thing for you at all. But it's demanding of you things. And Saturn is a lord of karma, so these things may have long-standing patterns attached to them. Also, speaking of karma, because the North Node has recently gone into Cancer, that means the South Node is in your sign. So just what you needed, right? You needed the South Node transiting your sign. It's going to directly hit those who are born towards the end of Capricorn, so the late degree Capricorns, but yet and still it will be in this marriage house. It will be in your first house of the self. And I think that that's going to require you to look at deeply ingrained patterns within yourself and to vow to eradicate them if they are negative. And to really look at how you are interacting with life and becoming the best version of yourself. But with the North Node transiting that 7th house, that does increase the potential for you to meet your soulmate, your better half in the next 18 months. So what I would suggest is that you definitely look at how you are conducting yourself in relationships and just in general, Capricorn, and see if there are things that you do, not maliciously, but that contribute to a certain negative way that is off-putting to the other party. So too much selfishness, pessimism. I'm just thinking of some shadow aspects of Capricorn that you may still have within yourself. And all signs have shadows, all signs. And most people who are willing to look at themselves, who are not afraid, who don't shy away from it, they will, shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, I'm kind of like that, but I'm trying to get better. And that's all that you can do. You can only start with where you are, but it takes conscious awareness to once you have the awareness of it, it'll take care of itself, because you will catch yourself in moments where you are not thinking of another person. Being too harsh, I think, is sometimes how Capricorn deals with people one-on-one, where they just, it's that Saturn influence where they're just like, suck it up, buttercup. And can you tell I have Mars in Capricorn? I have that side to me. Yeah, I do. And I think sometimes it's needed. Saturn is a severe taskmaster, and sometimes we need an adult in the room. Sometimes we need somebody who is not afraid to lay down the law when others are just slacking off and not doing what they need to do. Saturn is about discipline, organization. We have to have that, or else we have chaos, don't we? But it's all about degrees. Taken too far, it becomes dictatorial, it becomes severe, it becomes harsh, and it becomes cold. But when it's done correctly with conscious awareness, it can create order out of chaos in others' lives. And that is beautiful. Okay, that's what I have for you, Capricorn. So I wish you all the best in the holiday season. Even if you don't celebrate it, just kind of soak up those good vibes. And if you are interested in a natal chart interpretation reading, I am offering them on sale through the end of the year. I know Capricorns love a good sale. So they're 20% off, and the link for that is below. And have a great end of the year. Take care. Bye.